Hey everybody, this is Steve with Smitty's Flybox. This month we're going to tie the famous Pat's Rubberlegs. This is a fish catching machine, the best stonefly nymph out there. Really fun to tie, but you got to have a few of these in your box, especially in the early spring when there's high runoff and the stoneflies get pushed around a little bit and they start moving around. So what I've got is a Daiichi hook here, 1730, and I've got some Round Rocks brass beads. And I'm going to start with this flex floss. And so I've actually threaded my bead on there and started my thread behind the eye of the hook. And for the antenna, I'm just going to tie in one strand and come back a little ways and fold it over onto the other side and make a couple of turns right there to get that how we want it. Let's come up underneath them a little bit, and that gets them standing up a little more. Like that. And what we can do is just whip finish there right now. All right, now we'll snip our thread off. And now we can push that bead right up there against the antenna. So all right, now we're going to add our lead wire here. So I'm just going to start wrapping that. And you can weight it as heavy as you'd like. If you only want a few turns, or if you really want it heavy, it's up to you. All right, that looks pretty good of how we want the lead. Now I'm going to make sure I make a bunch of turns right here just behind it. Reattach our thread. And then let's make a bunch of turns through that wire and really cinch down on that. We'll make a bunch of turns right up here behind it and come right back through it. And then let's actually whip finish again. So this is kind of our prep stage to this fly. What I would do is I would probably sit down and do this stage for whatever, half a dozen of these or so, because we're going to add some super glue here to really lock in that underbody. So I need time for that super glue to kick. So we'll I'd set that aside and let that kick and dry and come back, and we'll do the next part of the fly. Super glue has had a chance to kick. Let's just reattach our thread again now, and we'll start with the tail. So what I've done is I've just taken one strand of flex floss and just loop that over like that, and then I can come right in there in that little gap, lay that right on top, tie that in all the way back to our tying point, then they'll fork out there nice and straight like a V like that. Now for this particular one, I'm going to tie a variegated. So I've just got my variegated chenille. And I'm going to lay that in there, right there in that little spot behind. Again, tie that down right back up to our tying point. Let's let that hang. I've got a good 6-inch strand of that. And now let's tie in our rubber legs. So let's start with the first set about halfway up the hook shank. Now this can be a little tricky. I'm going to get myself a leg there a couple inches long, and just hold that on an angle like that right across the hook, and then I can come right there and make one wrap. See how that'll hold that right there? Now I need to figure eight, so I'm going to pull the front leg just back a little bit and just figure eight behind that. And now I can just make 3 or 4 good figure eight turns like that, and that's how we tie in our legs. So let's go about where that kink is in the hook, and we'll repeat that step. First wrap right there, pull the front leg back, and now I can figure eight. If they're not laying perfect right now, don't worry about it. We can manipulate those a little bit later. All right, now the last one, we're going to come just behind the bead. And we'll repeat that One there, pull the front leg back, and now we'll figure 8. Nice and tight right there. Okay, let's just take our thread right there behind the bead, and if you want, now's a good time. We can trim those legs up a little bit. Just don't over trim them. And now we'll wrap the chenille going forward. So I like to try to create a nice tapered body. So as I go, I'm going to go a little bit tighter against itself. Now this first set of legs, I'm just going to hold it right there and come in really tight right up against those, because I want those to angle back just a little bit. Okay, now let's just work our way forward. And the middle ones, I don't need those to angle as much, so we don't have to go super tight against those. Now the front ones, I want to angle those just slightly forward, so make a good tight wrap right behind them like that. And then we're at the last spot there. Now we'll tie that off, hold it straight up with our right hand, and we'll drop our thread over right there behind the bead. 3 or 4 good times, and now we can snip that off. Now it's really important that we come in here and really tie down that chenille right behind the bead. And now we can whip finish right behind the bead. Make a bunch of good tight wraps like that. Really snug that down, and we'll hit that with just a little bit of, and now I'm just going to add a little super glue to those thread wraps right behind the bead, and trim those legs how I want them. And we're going to take that thing out, and that should work.